Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties on the microphone. Hopefully you can turn the volume up and hear that okay. Anyway, we're talking about the cash receipts side, and we started with our cash balance beginning of month of $37,200. We're given the fact that they're going to sell fully depreciable equipment for $9,000, so we just put that in our cash budget under cash receipts. And so now we're doing Schedule A to find out what the collection of receivables will be for the month of November. And like we said, November sales, we collect 70% of 900,000. Well, that's 630,000. And then for October, we're going to collect 25% of 700,000, because it's 70,000 units times 10. And so that number is 175,000. And then for September, we're collecting 3% of monthly sales of 50,000 units times 10, so that's 500,000. So that is 15,000. Okay. So you add all that up and it comes to $820,000. So we can now put in here 820,000. And so if you add the cash balance beginning of month plus the collection of receivables in November plus the 9,000 sale of fully depreciated equipment, what you come up with is a total of 866,200 as your total cash available. Okay, so we whipped that part. Pretty easy, I think. That's the easy part. Now, for our payments, the biggie is going to be this one: payments for purchases of merchandise. Payments for operating expenses is kind of a no-brainer. You simply take your $225,000 minus the 40,000 depreciation. Now, why are you deducting $40,000 of depreciation when it's an expense? Well, because depreciation is a non-cash item. There's no cash flow that goes out in November for depreciation expense. Okay? So you have to back that number out of total operating expenses for the month of November. So that number is going to be, and we'll put that right here, 185,000. And then the payment on notes payable, that's a given, so that is 102,500. So the real problem here, the real big problem, is figuring out the payments for purchases of merchandise, which we'll do with Schedule B. But to get to Schedule B, you have to get to this. You have to get to the computation of purchases before you can figure out how much you're going to pay for those purchases, because it says that because purchases are payable within 15 days, approximately 50% of the purchases in a given month are paid in the following month. The average cost of units purchased is $6 per unit. Okay? So some of what's purchased in October is paid in November. And of course, part of what's purchased in November is not paid till December. So that's why you have to do this additional schedule dealing with the computation of purchases. Okay, so let's get going on this. And so what we have here, we've got the computation of purchases. It starts with inventory at the end of September. And so the way to figure that out is you have 2,000 units. And again, it says that inventories at the end of each month are maintained at the level of 2,000 units plus 10% of the number of units that will be sold in the following month. Okay, for September, that's 2%, or excuse me, 2,000 units plus 10% of 70,000 units. Okay, so 10% of 70,000 is 7,000. So that's going to be 9,000 units. And to that, you're going to add the purchases in October. And that's going to be 70,000 units. And then what we're going to have is, and I'll do this down at the bottom of the page, you're going to have 2,000 units plus 10%. Times 90,000 units. Well, where does that come from? Well, that's the estimated number of units you're going to sell in November. And so this equals 11,000 units. So what you're going to do in your purchases in October, you're going to take your 70,000 units that you expect to sell in October, plus this ending inventory of 2,000 units plus 10% of the expected sales for, in this case, the next month in November of 90,000. So that equals 11,000. So 11,000. And then what you have to do is you have to back out the 9,000 units that you're going to have at the beginning of October of 9,000. So the net effect of that is you're going to add essentially 2,000 more to this 70,000. So you've got 72,000 units here. So 9,000 units inventory at the end of September, plus you add purchases in October of 72,000 units. That's going to equal, at $6 per unit, so we'll put it in units and dollars, 81,000 units, and that for dollar purposes is 432,000. Okay. From that, you're going to subtract sales in October of 70,000 units. And that's going to equal your inventory at the end of October of 11,000 units. Okay. And so kind of like we did here with the add purchases in October, we got to do the same thing in November. And here's where we have to consider the sales, estimated sales in, or the estimated purchases in December. Because you've got to do that 2,000 units plus 10% times the estimated sales in units in December. Okay, so anyway, we add purchases in November. So that's going to be our 90,000 of expected sales in November. And then as far as the number you're going to add, it's going to be, and I'll do it down here. $2,000 units. So this is what I did for October. Purchases in October, that was added. In November, it's 2,000 units plus 10% times 60,000. So that equals 8,000. And from that, what we're going to do is subtract 11,000, which is our number right here, our ending inventory as of October. So it's 9,000 plus 8,000 minus 3,000. So you're going to end up with 87,000 units. All right, so if you take your inventory at the end of October of 11,000, you add your purchases in November of 87,000, you come up with your available for sale in November of 98,000 units. All right. And so if you take this back to this 80,000, or excuse me, 87,000, that's going to be the purchases in November. You multiply that times 6, what you're going to come up with is 522,000. And this is in dollars over here. And just kind of going through the rest of this, not that it's that big of a deal, but so you got 98,000 less sales in November, estimated of 90,000 equals ending inventory of 8,000. Okay. Well, why did we go through all that? Well, we don't know what, and I'll go back to this. Okay. We don't know what this number is. October's purchases and November purchases in Schedule B, which will be transferred over to here in our cash budget, until we actually do this. And so our purchases in October are 432,000, and in November 522,000. And so how that relates to this Schedule B and the cash budget is that our purchases in November and October is going to amount to, as it says, a cash outflow equal to 50% of 432,000 and 50% of 522,000. So that's what Schedule B is for. October purchases is 50% of 432,000. So that equals what? 216,000. For November purchases, it's 50% times 522,000. And so that number is 261,000. And so the cash outflow total for purchases of merchandise in November is the sum of October purchases of 216,000, half of October purchases of 216,000, and half November purchases of 261,000. So $477,000 total. All right. So we take this number and simply transfer it over here to under payments for purchases of merchandise, $477,000. And so if you add up this number, this number, this number, what you come up with is a total of $764,000 and oh, excuse me, this is 102,250. My bad. All right, so 477,185,000 and 102,250. The sum of that is 764,250. If you want to put that in brackets so you know that you're going to subtract this number from this number, so you subtract your total payments, which is this number for the month, from this number, total cash available, and the sum of that is going to equal your cash balance at the end of the month. And so that number is going to be 101,950. Okay? So there you go. That is a cash budget. And a note, we've included some additional budgets. Purchases budget. That's this. We've done collection of receivable schedule. We've done a payment of purchases on merchandise schedule. So this really ties in the sales budget, the purchases budget, the general administrative expense budget, as well as the cash budget. So I just thought this would be a good way of kind of summing up all that stuff in the lecture and in the chapter, because the chapter is, quite detailed. So again, I say, if there's anything you learn from this chapter, or I hope that you learn from this chapter, it's how to prepare a cash budget, because this is pretty important to the survival of whatever company you're in, whether it's your company or somebody else's company. So anyway, problem is 23.3a, and again, hopefully you can take this as a pattern, as a template, and figure out 23.3a.